The Thinker opens with the story of Seth Richmond's house and where it comes from. It was built by Seth's grandfather, ultimately, then left to Seth's father, Clarence Richmond. Clarence was involved in a street fight with a newspaper editor concerning a story being published about him and another woman. With the death of Clarence Richmond, Virginia, Seth's mother, was left with the burden of caring for their son. Being a single mom, she had to find work, in which she did so as a court stenographer in the county seat.
When Seth was 16, he decided to leave town with two of his friends on a freight train. They were to live off stealing baskets of food from farmers at the fair. Upon Virginia finding out of the disappearance of Seth, she decided to make a list of things to say that would show her disapproval of his actions. Once Seth returned, he told a deliberate story to tell his mother. His reasoning was he wanted to return within an hour into the trip, but he had to see the whole adventure out until his two other friends were ready to return. Virginia being stunned, she encourages Seth's actions and returns to her day.
Seth despises all the nonsense the townspeople talk about. He decides to go to the new Willard house one day to visit his friend George Willard. As Seth is walking up the stairs of the house, he hears chatter about politics. Not being able to bear this talk, he decides to continue up the stairs. There, a window looks out into the alley, showing the town baker, Abner Groff. Abner appeared to be frustrated, and Seth wished he felt the same way.
George Willard was aspiring to become a writer. He talks to Seth about his current paper he is working on. It details the whereabouts of each townsperson from where they went to the reasoning for doing such. George confesses to Seth about his true underlying plan. He wants to write a love story involving Helen White, the banker's daughter. George asks Seth to profess his love to Helen for him since Seth is more acquainted with Helen than he is. Irritated and shocked, Seth says, speak to her yourself. And then he thinks, I'm going to find Helen White and talk to her, but not about him.
On his way to Helen's house, he passes the townspersons, and Seth solidifies his opinion on not belonging to Winesburg, as he is an outcast. After knocking on Helen's house and getting past the awkwardness, he tells her that he needs to get out of Winesburg. He then proceeds to ask her to take a walk, to which she replied, yes.
Reminiscing in the past, Seth remembers the many notes that Helen used to write to him, and the joy it gave him to think that the most attractive girl had selected him. They both stopped by a fence surrounding an old vacant factory where they saw Bella Turner kissing a man. This provokes Helen to hold Seth's hand, making him dizzy. This leads to the undesired outburst, which exclaims the very thing he wished not to share. They walked in silence for a while. The delight of walking with the girl excites Seth, even if it is around Winesburg, which causes him to question his initial mindset of leaving. The couple finally arrives at the bench in the garden.
Suddenly, Seth releases Helen's hand as a means of upholding his promise of leaving Winesburg. Impressed by his devotion, Helen sees that he is no longer a boy, but a man. And with that, Seth promises Helen that this will be the last time she will ever see him. She then runs off into the night, leaving Seth to think alone, where he predicts that Helen will end up with some fool, someone who talks a lot, someone like George Willard.